Let us pray. Armim ka Adonai ki dilitani. Adonai Elohai la'olam odeka amen. I will extol you, O Lord, for you have drawn me up. O Lord my God, I will give thanks to you forever. Amen. So we've come to the last in our weeks, in our month-long series on the life of Jacob. And there is more to the story, but this is what we've got for today. We've talked about his birth and his conflict with his brother Esau. We talked about Jacob running away from Esau's wrath and seeing a connection between heaven and earth. We talked about Jacob marrying his two cousins and all of the chaos that brings and brought into Jacob's life. Between last week and this week, Jacob worked for his uncle Laban for, who knows, for 20 years. And after the 14 years of earning his wives, he worked as a hand for Laban's flocks, for his sheep, for his goats, for all of this stuff. And after a while, they made a deal that some of the flock would be Jacob's and some would be Laban's. And Jacob's flock flourished and Laban's not so much. Laban wasn't so happy about that. And so after a time, Jacob felt the call from God to return to his homeland, to return to Canaan and make amends with his brother Esau. And so today, this is where we find that text, where Jacob has taken his family and they have left and they've begun the travels back home. And Jacob is now preparing. He's preparing to meet his brother Esau. And so he sends his whole entourage, his wives' servants, his sons, 11 of them, at least one daughter. We don't know how many more. There may or may not have been. Can you imagine? Oh my gosh. All of the flocks, all of the servants, the whole crew is one side of the river and Jacob's on the other. And Jacob wrestles with a figure who appears. You see, it's really an interesting story, this wrestling that Jacob does, because it's some man who just kind of appears and attacks Jacob for no apparent reason, right? Jacob has this physical altercation, and it lasts all night long. Jacob is simply wrestling for his life, and he's not entirely sure why, until the figure decides that it's time. Like, I'm done with this. Enough already. And so grabs Jacob's hip and tears his tendon, because that's an easy thing to do. Or something. And then says to him, just let go of me so that I can go away now. You won. I give up, right? And in that moment, all that Jacob wants is a blessing. Like, I have been wrestling with you all night long. I get a blessing out of this deal. And so the figure says to Jacob, what's your name? He doesn't say, Jacob, what's your name? But what's your name? And gives Jacob a new name. No longer will he be Jacob, the one who laughs, but Israel, the one who has struggled with God. Now, I could be wrong, but I suspect that Jacob is not the only one who has wrestled with God in his lifetime. I suspect that perhaps you maybe have wrestled with God a time or two. You know, the life of faith is not an easy path. It's not something that simply comes to us naturally. But it's a struggle at times. It's work to do this life of faith thing. Sometimes the struggle comes with the things that are going on around us. COVID, for example. Sometimes the struggle is in how we can react to the world around us. Sometimes the struggle is just simply knowing whether God is there. But I think the key in Jacob's story is that in the midst of the struggle, we can and often do see the face of God. Peniel, the place that Jacob names because of his struggle, literally means the face of God. And so it is in the midst of this struggle that Jacob sees God and understands that it will be okay. This encounter he's getting ready to experience with his brother and the life further. So the question becomes, when we struggle in life, when we struggle with the world, when we struggle with staying at home or wearing a mask or not seeing friends or whatever it may be, where in that can we see God? Where in the midst of the struggle is God calling to us and saying, it will be well? You have struggled with God and with man, and you will be okay. I know it's kind of a funny thing to say, but there are some blessings in the midst of COVID. I talk about it often. My entire June got canceled. The whole month of June, it just got canceled. I'm a person, I love annual conference with all of my being. You just know that now. It's a part of the freak of my nature. But when we canceled annual conference, I was really sad. We had this awesome conference plan. We were going to be in South Dakota. It was going to be amazing. And then I realized that once conference was canceled, and then the week of camp that I was supposed to be leading after the week of conference was canceled, all of a sudden I had time to move. Because before that, I was going to be helping my children finish school on June 3rd, be at conference by June 10th, be at camp by June 14th, and then I was going to be moving sometime in the middle of that so that I could be here by June 28th. I would not have done so well with that. I think I probably would have arrived here very tired. But instead, my June got canceled because I needed to stay home. Because in order to stay safe, in order to stay healthy, in order that we may all someday be able to gather together in this place, we all needed to stay home. And instead, I got 3 weeks to pack and unpack and relax and begin in this place refreshed, renewed, and ready to begin a whole new challenge of what it is to begin at a new church in the middle of a global pandemic, when this is how we experience one another. COVID's not an easy thing. It's a struggle for all of us. We are all missing out on life in one way or another, and yet we see the call and the blessing of God in the midst of it, whether it's in the matter that June got canceled, or in the ability to reach out and to connect with one another on a regular basis. On our Zoom worship services, we have people across the Twin Cities, some who maybe have never walked into this building for worship, certainly not. On a regular basis, there are people attending our Zoom worship services from different states who couldn't come on a Sunday morning. The ability to reach out and show the love of God is only expanding in the midst of COVID, even as we are staying closer to home. So this day, I think the question becomes, how is it that we see the face of God in the midst of our struggle? Not because God is creating the struggle, but because God is watching over us and helping us to understand that the struggle is another step along the path. That life is not always easy, but that God is with us every step of the way, watching over us and helping us to see a new light, a new life in the midst of the chaos. Let us look for that light this day. Let us take that next step. Let us share the love that God has for us and for all the world, even in times that are uncertain, even when we don't know what next week will bring. Amen.